Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming and welcome to this event. We're going to be talking a little bit about preparing teens for a changing world. And we're going to be doing that with Dave Spencer, the author of our best-selling and beloved Gateway to the World series. This is going to be part of our Advancing Learning academic program. If you're not familiar with what that is, that's going to include a webinar series, a blog, a podcast, and plenty more support and inspiration for teachers of teens. You'll be able to see a link in the chat in a minute for that. If you are in Switzerland, you'll be able to contact me or one of my colleagues to talk about any Macmillan products, but otherwise, please do look at the link on the screen to find your nearest Macmillan contact. So also, please don't forget to check your email later this week. You're going to receive after this a virtual goodie bag, which will be full of free teaching resources, as well as a certificate of attendance. And then, without much further ado, we're going to be please welcoming Dave Spencer, ELT expert, teacher, and the author of Gateway to the World. Welcome, Dave.
Hello, hello. I hope everybody can see me. Can you see me and hear me? That would be good to know. Yes. Julieta from Argentina. Hello, Julieta. Good to see you. This is great to be with you all. Yeah, I can see messages coming through in the chat box, which is always nice. Yeah, I can see lots of people from Czech Republic, and I know that Julieta, a big friend of mine, although we've never met, is from Argentina, which I've no idea, Julieta, what time it is in Argentina, but Bratislava. Somebody's saying they can't hear me, but I hope that you can. We cannot hear. Can you hear me? Could somebody from my team tell me? I think you should be able to hear me. Do you can hear me? Yeah, it's okay now. Yes, now. Okay, good. Well, that's good to know. I am going to share my screen as I continue talking to you, but it's great. Thank you so much to all of you for joining me today. I hope you can see my screen again in the chat box. If you could just tell me if you can see my screen or not, that makes me feel good. You can see me. Hello, Renata. Good to see you again, although I can't see you, but you can see me. Hello, we've got Zoya. Hello, Zoya. And I've got a whole group of friends here, my friends from my Facebook page. Beautiful to see you. You can see my screen as well, I imagine, my screen showing the PowerPoint presentation. Hello, Slovakia. I would love to get back to Slovakia very soon. I've been to Czech Republic. Somebody's saying they can't see my PowerPoint. You can see my PowerPoint now, right? Yes, thank you very much. Good. This is always the typical chat just at the beginning, because it's always good to know that you can see and hear me. Thank you so much for joining me. This is, I think, the last webinar that I will be doing this academic year. Of course, there will be more after that. Great to be with you. And I must admit, this was actually, this PowerPoint, this presentation was, I was asked to do this. And when the title was suggested to me, preparing teens for a changing world, it's a title that I was particularly interested in speaking about, because as you can imagine from the title of Gateway and Gateway to the World, this is really what the book is all about. This is what the course is about. The course is about preparing teenagers for life after school, whether that is life in the working world or life in the academic world of university. This is what really Gateway is all about, helping our teenage students to gradually become ready for what comes after school. And I say gradually, and I'll be explaining that concept in more detail throughout the talk. But the idea is that little by little, teenagers become ready for what comes after school. Now, there's this great quotation. I'm sure some of you will have seen this YouTube video. In fact, there is a whole series of videos called Did You Know Shift Happens? By the way, I always have to check that my PowerPoint says shift happens and not something else. But it says shift happens. And it's a fascinating concept that everything is changing very, very quickly. The world is changing quickly, exponentially quickly. And how do we prepare our teenage students today to be ready for the world of tomorrow? And in this initial video, which was 2008, and I'll show you some quotations from later adaptations of this video, this fascinating concept, and I think it is a fascinating concept. Many of our students may end up doing jobs that don't exist yet, with technologies that haven't been invented to solve problems we don't even know are problems yet. Isn't that like an amazingly powerful quotation? We don't really know what the future is going to hold. Artificial intelligence, etc., etc. Everything is changing very quickly. According to the US Department of Labor, today's learner will have 10 to 14 jobs by the age of 38. And again, certainly for my generation, that is a whole shift in perspective, because really people would do one job and that is all they would do probably for the rest of their lives. Some people are saying the presentation is blurry. There is really nothing that I can do because I think my internet connection is fine. I don't know if anybody else has any other solution to that because it doesn't usually happen. Again, I can't really do anything about it unless somebody can actually help, because it's from my side, it's absolutely fine. Might have to do obviously with your particular internet connections. But anyway, if somebody could tell me any advice there, because here it's absolutely fine. Sorry about that. But anyway, I'll read for you the last quotation so that if you can't see it, I'll read it to you. According to the US Department of Labor, today's learner will have 10 to 14 jobs by the age of 38. That means that we are preparing our students for a future that is very, very complicated, that has lots and lots. Wait. I haven't got any virtual black backgrounds either. This has never happened before. I'm not sure if anybody can give me some advice from Macmillan there, because there's really nothing that I can do. But I'm wondering about whether stopping or continuing, or whether just explaining the PowerPoints, the slides. When we're saying blurry, we're saying, yeah, I think I'm just going to continue. If I stop sharing and share again, I think I can stop my video if anybody thinks that will help. I'm just going to carry on. Exactly. Yes. Okay. So anyway, if you're having problems with the slides, then I'm going to try and give a running commentary of the slides so that you can understand what I'm saying. So what I was just trying to explain now is that the point is that we're preparing our teenage students for a future which is changing rapidly. Yeah. So an interesting question here, I think, is that some students might think that what they're doing in school then is not actually preparing them for life after school. And you can tell me in the chat box if you think that that is true either for you when you were a student, or whether it is true for the students that you have today in the classroom. So please just tell me in the chat box, what do you think? Do you think that what you learned was a waste of time at school? Or do you think that your students today feel that what they're learning is not preparing them for life after school? While you're answering in the chat box, as an older person, shall I say, I will tell you what I feel. What I learned at school was not directly relevant to preparing me for life after school. I think it was maybe indirectly useful, but it wasn't directly useful. There's a great quotation here from another book, and I think this is a powerful quotation talking about education. If you are not a teacher, when was the last time that you needed in your real life to solve a quadratic equation? Or recall without recourse to your iPads the capital city of Mongolia, or explain the difference between a terminal and a medial moraine, or a breve and a minim. And I think this is an interesting quotation. I think that sometimes that what we study at school, there does seem to be a lot of like memorization of information, which is actually maybe not always directly useful. And there is sometimes information that we think, well, I'm never going to use this again. Hello, Isabel from Argentina, as always here with me. Thank you very much. Yes, so is it directly useful? I always think that there's something very interesting that I spent a long time at school studying Latin. And I think Latin is a very good example of something which is not directly useful in the 21st century. I think you would agree with me. At the same time, it was indirectly useful because it helped me to learn about grammar, helped me to learn about language in general. And I think I'm going to make a separation between things that are directly useful in the world, as Susanna is making a good point here. Yeah, this is kind of the point that I was trying to make. Sometimes you could do something like a learning capital cities, and that's not directly useful. Indirectly, it's useful because you're exercising your brain, you're using your memory, you're exercising your memory, and that is useful for life in general. I think today there is a concentration on trying to teach skills which are kind of directly useful to what is going to happen after school. There's a lot of information on this screen. The main information that I want you to look at, and I'm going to read it aloud if you can't see my screen, but if you look at the middle numbers, 54% of firms believe graduates are not prepared for work, and 88% of firms, companies, believe that school leavers are not prepared for work. Now, those are big numbers, those are big percentages. You'll notice also underneath it says reasons for this include a lack of soft skills, such as communication, team working, and resilience. So 55% of companies believe that graduates from university, we're talking about the UK, each country will be different, of course, but the 55% of graduates do not have the soft skills such as communication, team working, and resilience. And I'm going to be talking about all of those skills throughout my talk. So I think this is an interesting starting point. Companies believe, rightly or wrongly, but companies believe that school is not preparing students for the world of work. But it's not only the world of work that is a problem. These are interesting articles from 2016, 2017. Students are not being prepared enough for higher education, says university admissions officers. And millennials are not ready for the reality of college and can't manage time or money. So I think this is interesting that there seems to be a consensus from companies and from universities that students are not ready for life after school. Now, I think the argument is very complex. There are lots of reasons why maybe school is not obviously about just preparing students for the world of work. But it is interesting that there seems to be a consensus that we do need to help our students to be ready for life afterwards. By the way, it is very annoying for me as well that I can see that people are saying that it's blurred, but I really don't know. I could switch off my camera if that makes any difference, but I'm not sure that it will. So I'm going to carry on. Somebody's saying they can't see a thing. I don't know whether centrally there is a way of helping to solve this problem, because I don't think there's anything that I can do. I'm going to continue, and I'm going to continue explaining. So if you can't see things, I will explain as well as I can about what is on the screen. The first thing that I'm going to show, and by the way, many of the things that I show, you don't need to look at these things in detail, but this is just, even if you just look at the title, I'm going to show you today lots of examples where Gateway to the World is preparing students at different levels, at different ages, different degrees of English, but how we help to prepare students for life after school. And this is just one example where I mentioned that universities are saying that school doesn't prepare students with okay, so we're preparing students that students don't know how to manage their own time well. And this is just one example where I have actually, when I read that initial article in 2016, 2017, then I decided to include something in Gateway about this. And these spreads, so these 2 pages are at the central core of the units in Gateway to the World. What we're doing is we are addressing these questions, addressing these problems that students might have today, and helping them to think about them. And just so that you know, in each of these spreads, there was always a video, a documentary video. And this video is particularly fascinating. It's about a school which is particularly famous in the UK. And it's a school where the students actually decide at the beginning of the year if they will give their smartphone to keep in the school so that it does not distract them from their own study time, which is a fascinating concept. And I think my students, certainly in I teach in Spain, my students in Spain would find that very difficult, a very difficult concept to imagine. By giving away their smartphone for the whole of the term, they will be able to concentrate more. One thing that I'm just being told, just so that you know, obviously for me, this presentation is working fine. Maybe for you, it's blurry. The video and the recording of this webinar will be made available to you afterwards. So you should be able to see everything very clearly afterwards. But anyway, I'm going to continue, and I'm going to continue explaining what is on my slides so that you can understand what I'm talking about. But yes, universities feel that teenage students are not ready for university because they don't know how to manage time. Well, that's exactly what this section of the unit in Gateway to the World is being used to do. Now, I think that there are many, many things that we can, as teachers of teenagers, do to help prepare our students for this changing world. And to be honest, I think one of the reasons why I still enjoy being a teacher of teenagers is because we're not just teaching them English. We're teaching them English, but we're also helping them with these particular skills that will help them to adapt to the new world. And I think that obviously the main thing that we can do is teach our students life skills, soft skills, and transferable skills. I've seen them being called other things too. I think one of the confusing things is sometimes we use these different expressions, and I think that they're we're talking about the same things. Life skills, things that prepare you for life after school. Soft skills, I think, is an expression which we usually use to mean that they are not skills just for one specific job. My initial screen at the beginning of this talk was saying that many students will have to do 10, 14, or maybe 20 jobs. So our job is not to teach the skills for one specific job. Our job is to teach the skills which we can transfer from one job to the other. Now, again, this, if you're having problems reading the screen, then don't worry, because I'm going to explain this one to you. But this is the CBI, okay? The CBI is the Confederation of British Industry. And the whole idea here, it's a report on getting young people work ready, which is an interesting expression, okay? So school getting students to be work ready. And it says here, I'll read it to you, 97% of teachers agreed that skills are as important or more important than academic qualifications. And 72% of teachers accepting that we should be doing more to develop students' skills. Again, those are big numbers, and I think that we need to take them seriously because lots of people are saying these things. Now it says businesses talk about skills, soft skills, employability skills, or life skills. They are talking about how character and knowledge is applied in real life scenarios. And then it says when employers talk about skills, they're talking about things like, and now in the chat box, please, could you write down any skills that you think are useful for our teenage students to be ready for life after school, either at university or at in the world of work? Could you just tell me any ideas that you've got? What skills do you think our students should have to be ready? Jacqueline, thank you. Reflection, that's an interesting concept, yeah. Understanding what they read, definitely. And of course, as English teachers, we do that, right? Silva, presentation skills, that's definitely a very important idea. Cooperation, negotiation, resilience, and I'm going to be talking about that in detail in a short while. Critical thinking, Renata, I would agree with you there. Finances, and Alexandra, a very important word that you've said there, teamwork, right? Digital skills, how to communicate, and I think that is a very key skill, right? And show respect. Collaboration, compromises, again, that's a really interesting concept. I think what is interesting, when I see these words, you probably know, I think I said before, I'm still in the classroom, and I think these are really important skills, and they are skills that maybe our teenage students don't always have, but that they can learn and that we can help develop with them. This is how the CBI continued, in fact. You can see, I hope, some of those words. If not, I'll read them out to you. They suggest that some of the skills are skills that you've already mentioned. Problem solving, management, reflection, which is the first thing that somebody said straight away in the chat box. Thank you. Managing time, we've already mentioned that. Teamwork, somebody has already mentioned collaboration. Leadership, creativity. Now, as soon as I see all of these skills, these are things that I think are really useful, and they're immediately things that I think as a teacher, I do want to develop with my students. They're things that I think personally are important. And I also think that they are things that we as teachers can seriously help them with. So what I want to, if you're not already convinced, what I want to convince you today is that, first of all, these skills are really useful for our teenage students. And secondly, that all of these skills are things that we can easily do in the classroom. They're things that often already, as English teachers in the classroom, we already do. I'm looking at the words debating. In my classes, I like having debates in English. I'm looking at the word presenting. In my classes, I like getting my students to present. I'm looking at the word creativity. in my English lessons, I want my students to be creative. So what I'm trying to suggest to you is that these are not things that are difficult to incorporate into our lessons. I think they are things that we should be incorporating in our lessons and things that we probably are already incorporating. Now, another concept, again, do not worry if you see the screen and if it's blurry, because I'm going to talk you through it. But the main thing that I want to point out is that this is from Gateway to the World A2. And one of the things that I would like to persuade you to do today is to incorporate these skills at lower levels and at lower ages. And that's what we try to do in Gateway to the World. I don't believe that these things are things that should be taught only when our students are 17 or 18. I want to incorporate them as younger teens. And what we do in Gateway to the World, is we introduce these concepts in a simple way with simple language at lower levels and at younger ages. And as each level progresses, and as the age of the students goes up, we're going to become slightly more complicated, slightly more sophisticated, and go into things in more detail. But you can probably see, even if your screen is blurry, you can see that there is a red and blue box in the bottom corner there. And to read it to you, it says the top soft skills that teens need. And these are things that we're going to teach our students about, even at younger ages and even at lower levels. And we're making it very basic, not too much information, but we're talking about communication, which, when you think, of course, is key to an English teacher's job. That's what we're teaching, communication. Collaboration. And so again, we're pointing out to the students the need for collaboration in the classroom, working together, which I, again, wholeheartedly believe that as teachers of teenagers teaching English, we need to be encouraging pair work and group work and teamwork. And thirdly, creativity, which is a word that I've used already. And again, I'm pointing out to you, just to make it very clear, we are helping our students to understand that in any job, and at university too, those three soft skills are really, really useful. They're things that will help them to develop in their lives at school, at university, in the world of work, and probably also outside the world of university and work. Again, do not worry about any details on the slide, but what I want to point out to you now is that we're talking about more or less the same concept, but now we're talking at B2 level. And you'll see, if you look at the bottom box again, which is in red, now we're talking about transferable skills, and we're going to go in more detail. And again, I'm trying to emphasize the point to you that I think as teenagers, when teenagers are younger teenagers, throughout the time as they go to 18, we're going to keep on developing these ideas. That's what we would do in, there's a subject in English schools called PSHE education. It's a type of education which is preparing students for the world of work and university. And it goes gradually, step by step. In this case, in B2, we're going into more detail about things like IT skills, problem solving, inquiring, responsibility, patience, and organization. So little by little, we're going to keep on developing these concepts with our students so that by the time they leave school, they're going to understand them better and better. And what we're doing is we're using English to do this. As I've said before, on these pages, we have videos. So the students are listening to this information, they're watching it on the screen, then they're reading about it, and then they're discussing it. And the point is that we're doing all of this in English. And again, taking another step forward, we're going to move it to the next stage, which is B2 plus. And now we're going into more detail about specific skills. And here we've got information about communication skills, which again, I think that these questions are very much useful for students who are learning a language. The 4 skills are broken down into thinking it through. So think before you speak, which of course many teenagers and many adults have problems doing it. Being assertive, which doesn't mean being aggressive, but it means stating what you really think in a clear way. Remembering to listen, which again is a key skill which I think many teenagers and many adults, many of us lack, is listening before we reply, and also thinking about our body language. Okay, so the whole idea here is that I think that as English teachers, we can easily incorporate these life skills, soft skills, transferable skills, which will be vital to our students to be able to succeed in life as this changing world keeps on happening and changing ever faster. Now, one thing also that we do in Gateway and Gateway to the World is that we develop what are called thinking skills. And I think that thinking skills are something that really are going to be key in the future. We need to help our students to think on their feet, because often, as this slide is showing you, plan A, we all have a plan A, but sometimes plan A doesn't work, and we have to think of the next stage. What are we going to do next if plan A doesn't work? And then we need to think of plan A, plan B, plan C. And by teaching our students thinking skills, we can help them to become more independent in life because they can think for themselves. And again, you can tell me in the chat box if you agree with me, but I think many teenage students simply they conform to what people tell them to do, but they don't necessarily then have this independence, this autonomy of then deciding to think of new solutions. Another expression which we've seen a few times already today is problem solving. And I think that if we can teach our students to solve problems, we're helping them very much in the 21st century to adapt to whatever the future holds. Thank you. I can see a lot of people agreeing with me, which is nice to know. Now, in Gateway to the World, we have incorporated something which I think is really interesting, visible thinking routines. If you don't know about visible thinking routines, then I suggest that you look at the Harvard Graduate School of Education website, where they are encouraging students to put into practice these routines. Some people don't like the word routine. I like the word routine, teaching students good habits that they apply to many different situations. And I think that's important to bear in mind, that when we teach our students a good thinking routine, they are not just applying it to one page of the book or one text or one section. Personally, I want my students to apply these thinking routines to many, many different situations. Now, again, here's an example, because obviously all the examples I'm showing today are from Gateway to the World. They are things that you can take away and use with any text or with any lesson that you do with your students. Shan Khan, that is such a beautiful thing that you've just said to me. That is great. That is really useful to know. I would like to publicize that little that comment there, and a big hello to your students, your teenagers, because that's exactly what I'm here to do. I'm here to help teenagers and the students. That's the whole idea of these lessons. Now, this spread here, hello to Shan Khan students, and you have to tell me where you are, which part of the world you're in. That would be beautiful to know. Anyway, this is a whole section, again, one of these spreads from Gateway to the World. And I read a really fascinating statistic just a few weeks ago. 62% of teenagers want to begin their own business rather than working for other people. Czech Republic, that's great to know. Thank you. Now, I think this is like a really interesting topic. There is a video here which is about a young girl in the UK who begins to make beautiful cupcakes, and she decides to turn this cupcake hobby into a business. And so this whole spread is about the concept of how can you turn your hobby into a business? And of course, if you think for a second, many people today are doing this in the world, obviously using social media. Now, what I want to point out here is we show this video about this young girl who turns her cupcake hobby into a business, selling cakes to make money. And we have this routine. And this routine, I'm going to show you different examples, but it's a personal favorite of mine. The thinking routine is called compass points, and that's because we have a word beginning with E, W, N, and S, so east, west, north, and south. I think it's particularly powerful because it's easy to remember. The students watched the video about making cupcakes and turning it into a business. And it says, with a partner, think about being in a situation like Sana's, where you could turn your hobby into a business. Answer the questions. So thinking about turning your hobby into a business, what could be exciting about being in this situation? What positives are there? So what makes this idea of turning your hobby into a business? What makes it exciting? That's E for exciting. W, what worries would you have in this situation? What could be negative about it? So obviously it's very exciting, but there are also things to be concerned about. So we need to think about those too. N is for what would you need to know that could help you to prepare for this situation. So I want to turn my hobby into a business. What do I need to know to make it happen? And S is what steps you could take to make sure you are successful in this situation. So I love this. It's a thinking routine. It's a very memorable thinking routine. It's a very simple one. And it also combines two things. Something that I'm going to talk about very soon is social and emotional learning, how you feel about something. So E for exciting, W for worries, N for needs, and S for steps. And what I particularly like about these thinking routines is, as I said before, you can adapt them for many different situations. So here's another example. Different situations, by the way, and also different levels. And I keep on saying this because I think it's important. I think that these thinking routines are not something only for high level and older teenagers. I think they're things that we could use at any level. So this one, I'll read it for you in case there's any problems with clarity. With a partner, talk about the next time you will need to make decisions about your studies. For example, choosing different subject options or passing from one stage of education to the other. So from school to vocational training, from school to university. So my students, when they're approximately 15, they have to make decisions about if they're going to study more science or more humanities. And this is obviously a traumatic period for many teenagers. So again, the idea here is that we're helping them to think about this situation in a clear, progressive way, and also thinking about their emotional state. So what would you need to know that you could help to prepare for the situation? What steps could you take to deal with the situation in a positive way? What could be exciting about being in this situation? And what worries would you have in this situation? What could be negative? So again, the four stages are the same: needs, steps, exciting things, and worries. And we're adapting to each different situation, thinking about any situation in these four ways. What we're talking about is helping our students to adapt to change. And I think that is the point, that the world is changing quickly. How can we help them to adapt to all these changes they have to make? And here's one last example of this compass points. Think about, and this is very useful for all of our students, I believe, think about how you can improve your English this year, set goals using the compass points. What excites you about learning English this year? What worries you about learning English this year? What do you need to know to learn better? And what steps can you take to learn better too? That particularly, I would suggest for you. Me personally, I'm coming to the end of an academic year. This question, I think, would be very, very useful to do with your students at the beginning of next year in September. Okay, so compass points. The next thing that I think that we can do to help our students prepare for the future is developing thinking skills, critical thinking skills in particular. And I think that in this world today, where things are changing so quickly, questions of artificial intelligence, questions of fake news, we need to develop critical thinking skills. And this is an example of how we do this in Gateway to the World B2+. This is all about an experiment which is to do with genetic modification. And I think that this is a really interesting topic. So this is the pictures, the two photographs there are actually linked. We've got a spider and we've got goats. And the idea is that the students are trying to look at those two pictures, and there is a thinking routine on the left-hand side which says, see, think, wonder. What can you see? What do you think it is showing? And what do you wonder about this situation? And it's in fact a biological experiment which involves spiders and spiders' webs, and including some synthetic way of incorporating spiders' webs into goat's milk and producing a super strong thread. Now, when I explain that, it's pretty amazing, it's pretty crazy. And I'm sure some of you are thinking that it sounds like a good idea, and some of you are thinking that it's a terrible idea. And what I think we need to do with our students is encourage them to say what they think about this situation. Do they think it's a good idea, or do they think it's a bad idea? Very important in these situations, which are very complicated. I call them slippery questions. They're slippery because it's not black and white, right? It's not easy to say, yes, do this, or no, don't do this. And I think if we're talking about preparing teenagers for the future, we need to be aware that not every question has a simple black and white answer. So the only thing that we can do to help our students is not tell them what is right or wrong, but help them to make decisions that are based on information and knowledge. And in the bottom corner, the bottom right corner of your screen, I'll read it for you if you can't see it, but it says that great learners are informed and knowledgeable. And I'd like to stress that first word, informed. And I think this is, again, something, if we're talking about preparing students to be ready for a changing world, the one thing that I would say to any teenager is that the more informed you are about different questions, the better will be your decision about what you say, what you decide to do afterwards. So informed, we need to give our students information. And by the way, that is one of the reasons why in Gateway to the World, all of the texts are real, genuine, real world information. And I think it's important that students learn about the world. And as I said at the beginning of this talk, the important thing is that students are learning about the world and they are learning English at the same time. And for me, this is like the way forward. We are teaching English, but we're also teaching something through English. By the way, as a little bit of light relief, I've been suggesting this idea of see, think, wonder, where students look at an image and say what they can see, what they think it is, and what they wonder about it is. This picture I'm going to show you now, you can tell me in the chat box what you think of this picture. This is just a little bit of light relief so that we're not getting too serious. But French professor Etienne Klein recently used the James Webb Telescope to take this photo of Proxima Centauri, the star closest to the sun. In the chat box, can you tell me which planet this looks like? It looks like a planet, but which planet does it look similar to? Can you tell me in the chat box if you've got any ideas? If you had to say Mars, straight away, somebody has said Mars, okay? Now, in theory, this photograph is of Proxima Centauri. I'm going to ask you, because some people might have seen this in the news, does anybody know what this photograph really shows? Prize for the person who tells me, the first person who tells me what it is. Does anybody know what the photograph really is? Salami, Ava, you are totally correct. It is sausage, okay? It's sausage meat. It's actually, rather than salami, it's Spanish chorizo, apparently. But basically, yes, it's sausage meat. And this is a fascinating story where a real professor, so Professor Etienne Klein really exists, but he fooled a science magazine by showing this photo and saying that it was Proxima Centauri, and it is in fact a slice of sausage. So I suppose that shows you that you can't believe everything that you see. Okay, we're going to look at two other main questions before I finish this talk. And at the end of the talk, if anybody does have a question, hopefully I will have time to answer it. I've mentioned already that we can teach life skills, soft skills, thinking skills, critical thinking skills to our students. I also believe that we need to prepare our students to be ready, not just on an intellectual level for the future, but we also need to help them to feel better about life in general. We need to develop emotional intelligence too, because that way students will find it easier to adapt to change. Now, there's a terrible statistic, and I'm not sure you can tell me if it's similar, if you think as teachers it's similar in your countries. I think particularly after COVID, we're saying that so many thousands of people under 18s are undergoing treatment for mental health problems or waiting to start care. I think that since the pandemic, there have been lots of problems, and there always have been, about students adapting to the future. Can you tell me what, in the chat box, what do you think are the biggest problems facing teenagers today? And actually, I know that we've got a class of teenagers watching this video. You might want to tell your teacher also what to type in the box. What would you say are the biggest problems that people are facing? Jacqueline, thank you very much. Anxiety, definitely. Anxiety is like a really strong word at the moment for the way that teenagers are feeling about their future. Insecurity, lack of confidence, right, and oral examinations, presentation giving, which is also a question of anxiety and confidence and self-esteem, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Loneliness, acceptance, uncertainty, depression. Yeah, definitely. All of these words are obvious words that I think are relevant today to how many people feel. Yeah, and obviously financial insecurity. I'm going to show you a list of things that I thought of. An interesting one is the last word there, eco-anxiety, which I think, again, is an interesting concept, right? That students are feeling anxious even about the environment. So if this is a problem, what we need to do as teachers of teenagers is teach social and emotional learning. And on the screen, you've got a very basic explanation of what that means. It means if we help our students to understand their own emotions, they can express themselves better. They can express their needs better. Also then, if you can understand your own emotions, it helps you to understand other people's emotions, which I think is a really important idea, the idea of empathy. And then this idea that once you understand your and your partner's emotions, then you can interact better. So just as like a simple point in Gateway to the World, what we try and do is develop students' positive attitudes to these problems. So they are problems, but let's give positive solutions. And one thing that I think is really powerful is to talk about comfort zones and stepping outside of your comfort zone. There's a very interesting statistic, which I'm going to show on the next slide, but we've got this idea of being in your comfort zone. When you, not just teenagers, but when adults also, when you are pushed slightly outside your comfort zone, you may reach the optimal performance zone, where you're working slightly harder than you would normally work and getting better results. And then the next stage is if you are pushed beyond that optimal performance zone, and then you might reach your danger zone. Again, I always find it fascinating that many of these ideas are not completely new ideas. This is an idea which originated, Robert Yerkes, I think he was American, 1907. Now, as I said before, this idea is still continued today, lots of investigation about it. And this is an interesting statistic. People who fail 15% of the time learn the fastest. I think if you think of English language teaching, that's probably, there's some truth here in texts which are slightly more difficult than the student's level. That's when students will learn more. If they understand everything in a text, they're going to remain in their comfort zone and they're not going to learn any more. So this whole concept, I think, is fascinating. The problem is that when we step outside further, then that's when problems start. Yes, Isabel, I agree. When you're poked from your discomfort, you perform better. But the key is not being poked too far, if you like, right? Now, this is again addressing the whole question about resilience, about grit, about tenacity. And we are particularly looking again in the video and in the text, we're looking at somebody who suffered a terrible accident when they were just 21. And since then, they have overcome many of these difficulties and they've pushed themselves to achieve many amazing things. And the text is focusing on the idea that by pushing yourself, overcoming these difficulties, you're going to do better. And what we do is another thinking routine. I've mentioned them already. The 4 C's: connections, challenges, concepts, and changes. So this is another Harvard visible thinking routine. Make connections between this person and your own life. Think about things that you want to challenge in the text. So you might not agree with everything in the text and you are free to challenge it. Also then to discuss key concepts in the text and then to consider changes. And what we do then is we move from this situation, which is quite a specific situation of somebody overcoming a physical disability, and then talking about the key questions of determination and resilience when it comes to studying. And there's a question in 6A, I'll read it for you. What examples can you think of where determination or resilience are important at school or in your studies? And how determined or resilient do you consider yourself to be? So in other words, again, we are addressing these key qualities that I think that we all have, but trying to develop them further and preparing our students to be resilient and determined. And I think there are some things that we can do in this case, particularly in the English language classroom. So I think it's directly relevant. I think with our students, we need to encourage a positive response to correction. So many people, when they are corrected, they feel negative, they feel down, they feel demotivated, but we need to help our students to realize that when we correct our students, we are helping them because we learn from our mistakes. We also need our students to realize that there are definitely realistic long-term goals. We don't want our students to be discouraged because you can't learn English in one day, in 1 week, or 1 month, or 1 year. English is a long-term project. We also need to help our students to realize why it's important that you don't need to understand everything in a text, particularly a listening text, so they should not give up when something is difficult. We also need to help students to realize that they will be good at some parts of English and less good at others. Most people are not good at everything in English. I think we also need to explain why not every activity in the English language classroom needs to be fun. Workbook activities are useful. They're maybe not always fun, but they're useful because they're useful consolidation of what the students are learning in our classes. And that's why it's a good idea to do them for homework. And I think we can also point out different examples of how tenacity helps people in all sorts of works of life. And often, if you look at any famous sports person, they nearly always talk about how tenacity and resilience has helped them to be successful. I'm going to run through the last 2 slides quickly because I know that I'm running out of time. I think that I think it's very important with teenage students to build on their confidence and self-esteem. To help our students, I'm going to pass this slide so that this one is easier to see. To help our students to be ready for the future, to be ready for the changes that the future will bring, we need to develop their self-esteem. And so this activity, which is from Gateway B1, is simply encouraging the students to think about how they can think positively, be confident in their own opinions, celebrate their own achievements, take exercise, think positively. Isabel, I've just seen your comment in the box, and I do think it's worth commenting on. I do personally, as a teacher, I find it very strange that sometimes students seem to believe that everything in an English class should be fun. That's why it appeared on my screen just then. It is an interesting comment, and I would like to make that clear. I think that we have a problem sometimes in English lessons, that English seems to be about games and listening to songs. And I teach, obviously, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. Sometimes when they say to me, this exam in English is difficult, and it's like, well, your history exams are difficult, your physics exams are difficult. Why do you expect English exams to be automatically easy? So I think it is an interesting point that I think we need to talk to our students about why, yes, to learn things, we actually have to put in a lot of effort too. But anyway, this slide, on the other hand, and I am about to finish, don't worry about timing, I'm going to finish very, very soon. I think we need to keep on building our students' self-esteem, not worrying all the time about progress. The progress is a very slow creature. It takes a long time to develop, and encouraging students not to give up and to believe in themselves. And the last thing that I wanted to mention was setting goals for the future. I think if we're preparing our students for the changing world that is about to come, then we need to help our students to develop goals. Goals, there's a blue box in the bottom corner. Goals, setting goals help us to develop focus, help to give us confidence, help to make you work hard, and teaches you responsibility. And again, simply saying once again that I think that, and the whole purpose of this webinar today is encouraging our students to set goals about learning, set goals about what they want to do after school, and help to build that self-esteem to help them to get to where they want to go. I began my talk with a YouTube series of videos called Did you know shift happens? This is a more recent version, 2018. This is fascinating, right? In 1900, the half-life of engineering information was 35 years. So when you learnt engineering in 1900, the information was relevant for 35 years. In 1960, what you learnt was relevant just for 10 years. Today, the half-life of engineering information is 4 years. So what you learn in engineering at university has a half-life of 4 years. That means that students earning a 4-year engineering degree, half of what they learn in the first year of college will be outdated the day that they graduate. That's a fascinating statistic. And again, finishing where I began my talk, I think that it's really interesting. Students are facing a very, very rapidly changing world. And I think that artificial intelligence is going to change it faster than ever. And what we need to do, I think, as teachers is basically teaching these soft skills so that students are, as I have said several times today, they're learning English and they're learning also about how to adapt to this rapidly changing world. And if it hasn't been clear already, I believe that Gateway to the World is a course which helps to do this. At the end of each book, at the end of each level, we have this learner profile. And the things that you can see here, great learners communicate, great learners work well in teams, great learners are open-minded, show solidarity with others. These are all qualities and skills that we try to develop throughout each level of Gateway progressively throughout the course. Okay, the only thing that doesn't change is change itself. That's a very famous quotation. By the way, look at the cartoon there. We've got the doer on, we've got the thinker on one side and we've got the doer. I love that, that cartoon. Makes me laugh every time I see it, the thinker and the doer. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm not sure if anybody has asked any questions that I have not been able to answer so far, but in the chat box you could answer. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can be joined again. Blanca, good luck using Gateway to the World next year. We are going to share the Gateway and my own Facebook page. And you can join me there. If anybody has any questions, any comments that I haven't answered today, then you can always join me on the Gateway Facebook page. There we go. Aniko has just shared there in the chat box. You can click on that and join me, make any comments that you like. Thank you so much for all the nice comments. I'm sorry if some people had problems with a blurry PowerPoint presentation. Thank you, Julieta. That's very kind of you. And I don't know what time it is in Argentina, but thank you very much for joining me, whatever time it is. You and Isabel, of course. Lots of things to think about, Darina. Exactly. Yes. This is a session where I've been talking about quite important concepts, I think. And definitely, we will be sharing this presentation with you so you can watch it again, think about anything that I've said. And as I've said, contact it. Isabel, it's midday in Argentina. That's a good time then. You can have lunch now. Some people are lifting their hands. I don't know if that means they have questions. And I don't know if Matt, maybe you're joining me. And if anybody, if you've got any questions that I've missed. Anita, good luck using the book next year. And as I say, any questions and comments you have, please do share them with me. Anna Hasper, beautiful to see you. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll be seeing you very soon. Uzde, this is a collection of all my my friends here. That's very, very kind of you to join me all. Beautiful to see you here. And I hope we meet in person again soon. Lots of people, by the way, from Czech Republic and Slovakia. Of course, I was in Czech Republic recently, had a great time, as always. Greta, beautiful to see you. Teona, I'm imagining that we're from Georgia, right? I've got to get back to Georgia one day, and very soon.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dave. That's a lot to think about, as we've just said. I'm going to share my screen for the couple of people that are still here. Just to recap a couple of things that we said in the beginning, please don't forget to check your email later this week. You'll get a certificate of attendance and a virtual goodie bags with some resources in it. And also to find your local Macmillan English contact, please check the link here, and that will also go into the chat in just a second as well. And as Dave said, please follow him on Facebook at facebook.com/teachwithdave. You're going to find their questions and answers, discussions, and invitations to future events as well. And check out macmillanenglish.com/gateway to the world to get some unit samples and scope and sequences of the courses so that you can see all of the details of those. And finally, join Teach with Dave to find lots of professional development resources for teachers of teenagers. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, and have a good rest of your day. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for coming along, and thanks for all the participation in the chat box.